So that's a little bit about Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. But one thing we should associate with him, and one thing I want to focus on, is his quality of justice. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Michael Hart, he actually wrote a book, and it was titled the 500 most influential people throughout of history, and he put Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu as number 52, right? So he was up there. Obviously for us in Islam, after the prophets, the first man, the best of men to walk on this earth is Abu Bakr, right? And then after him is Umar. So we put him as second, right? So we can see that even non-Muslims recognize Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu and his quality of being just. So there are many times, many stories that during his khilafah, when he was Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he was leading the Muslims, there are many things that he did that he was very just towards everyone. He was afraid that, he used to say that I'm afraid that the donkey in Iraq might testify against me for the burden that it has. He was concerned about the animals that they might, testify against me. He used to be able to go at night. He used to go at night and see, is there anyone that needs help? This is Amir al-Mu'mineen. This guy is, he's bigger than kind of like the president of the United States. He's going at night in the streets, asking people, looking to see if there's people that need him. And he used to have buckets or barrels of wheat and oil and all these type of things to give to people and see, is there anyone that needs these things? Anyone that needs some sort of help that I can give to them. And there's actually one story of one time he's walking in the streets and he sees one guy, he's drinking, he's a Muslim, right? He's drinking alcohol. Umar radiallahu ta'ala gets very upset. He sees him through the window, so he goes in his house, he opens the door, and he says, what are you doing? Are you drinking alcohol? Khamr, right? And then the man replies to him and he says, you don't have no right to tell me what to do. You just violated two things. One, you entered my house without my permission. Second, you're accusing me of something which you can't prove, right? So Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he just realizes what he did. He just says, okay, and he just leaves. Then afterwards, he sees, they don't see, the man doesn't see Umar radiallahu ta'ala for a while. Then afterwards, a few days later, they see each other, and he says, the man asks Umar, I haven't seen you in so long. Where have you been? You haven't come at night. You usually come and, I usually see you. And he says, that day when you told me to not enter a person's house, the day that, you accused me of something, I realized my mistake and I never did it again. And then Umar radiallahu ta'ala asked, so what about you? And he said, Ya Umar, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I drank that day, but after I was so ashamed to realize that you were there in front of me, that I never drank a sip of alcohol after that ever again, right? So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he has many stories where he's just so compassionate. And he's not just to Muslims, right? But he's also just to non-Muslims as well. And it's a very important lesson that we need to implement ourselves. There was a Coptic person in Egypt, and in that time, Islam was in charge of Egypt. There was under the rulership of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Egypt was under Islam. So this Coptic man, he goes in a race, like a horse race, with another Sahaba. It's the son of Amr ibn al-As, right? And he's going in a race with him, and he does this race, and the Sahaba wins. And he goes to this Coptic person, he whips him, and he says, this is in the name of my father, right? So this Coptic person, he gets he's very hurt, and he realizes that, there's a person in Medina who is known for his justice. So let me go to him. So he goes to Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and when he goes to Medina, he sees Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu in the masjid. And he's in the masjid just cleaning right here. So he's cleaning, and he goes, this Coptic person says, I have something to tell you. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he doesn't just say, oh, do you know who I am? I am Amir al-Mu'mineen. You need to have an appointment with me, right? He doesn't say anything like that. He says, come tell me what your issue is. So he tells him the issue. He relates to him the story that there was this person. he like did some injustice to me, and I want some sort of justice. So I want some sort of like payback. So then he calls Amr ibn al-As and his son. He calls them into Medina, and he confirms, is this what you did? And then they said, yes, this is what I did. And he gives the Coptic person a whip, and he says, go ahead and whip him and his father. And then the person's just shocked. Why his father? Because he said, that person whipped you in the name of your father. So that's just showing a little bit of justice, that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu wasn't just to Muslims but to non-Muslims as well. And very important lesson that we need to take ourselves. We're very just to Muslims, right? But when it comes to non-Muslims, we say it's okay, they're not Muslims anyway. Like we can do whatever we want with them, right? As Muslims, as people of character, we need to be just to everyone, right? Justice is very, very important, and we need to make sure that we everyone embodies it. And the other lesson we can derive from Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu's story is he went from a person who was a horrible human being, from a person who used to drink a lot, to a person who used to cry every night, who says, I don't know if Allah will accept what I'm doing. He said, on the day of judgment, I wish I was just a small small dust. I wish I was nothing in front of the eyes of Allah, because I don't know if I did enough. I don't know if I'm worthy enough, if Allah will accept it from me. So he completely had a 360 degree turn. Very important in our community, we need to understand this idea of judging someone. What we do is we judge someone, and we say that if this person is going on the wrong path, we say this person's never going to become a good Muslim. This person's never going to come to Islam. This person does this and this and this. And we start telling people, this person's a horrible human being, we have no hope for him, just forget about this person. We place a judgment upon the person. No one knows if that person might, the next day, become the best of Muslims, right? Sufyan al-Thawri, he is another Sahaba. He's known for praying Qiyamul Layl. They say about him that he used to pray so much Qiyamul Layl at night that he used to wake up before his wife, right? He used to pray Qiyamul Layl, and then he used to go and wake up his wife, and he used to stretch as if he just woke up, because he didn't want to tell his wife that he prayed Qiyamul Layl before her. So he used to pray every single night, and he says, I did one deed, I did one act where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited me from praying Qiyamul Layl for 6 months. For 6 months, I was not able to pray Qiyamul Layl. And you know what he did? He said, I saw someone cry. And I looked at that person, and I said, he's not crying for the sake of Allah. I placed a judgment upon him. I placed a judgment upon him, and I said, this person's not crying, he's being fake, he's not realistic, he's never a good person, right? And for that reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited him from praying Qiyamul Layl for 6 months. Very, very important lesson to derive from this. We should never judge people and say that this person's never going to go anywhere. Especially in high school, college. I know as growing up here, in the United States, a lot of people sometimes, what happens is you'll have the Muslims who are into their deen, and the Muslims who are not too much into their deen. They're not that active. And the Muslims who are active, right, they'll look at the other group and they'll say, oh yeah, they're never going to be good. Oh, don't hang out with them, right? We need to advise them. We need to encourage them to come to the masjid. We need to make sure that we take care of them. We call them. We have a good relationship with them. Very, very important lesson from the life of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So that's just a small glimpse of him. Obviously his life is so much. There's so many lessons you can derive. But his one thing is justice, right? Let's move on to the next person. The next person, there's Abu Bakr, right? The first Khalifa. Then there's Umar, he's the second Khalifa. And who's the third one? Uthman ibn Affan, right? He's the third Khalifa. Something about Uthman ibn Affan. He was very, very wealthy. He was one of those Sahabas that inherited, it says that, he inherited 30 million dinars from his father. His father was obviously very wealthy, right? So then he inherited all that money. So just think about it. On those days, first of all, right here, if somebody had $30 million, that's a lot of money, right? If you go back in the day, in that time, just imagine how much the 30 million dinar would be. So he had so much, and he was generous with it too. He was generous with giving his money because he knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him a trust, and he needs to make sure that he uses this trust wisely. That one day, he sees one boy, and he knows the situation of the family, of the boy, and that they're not doing too well financially. So he said, hey, why don't I buy you a garment? I'm going to buy you a garment just, as a gift. So he goes to the marketplace, he buys him a garment, but then in the pocket of the garment, of the shirt, he puts 10,000 dirhams in there, right, without the boy knowing. So he brings it to the boy and he says, wear it, let's see how it is, and he really likes it. He says, why don't you go show it to your parents, show how, this garment to them, and see if they like it. And he goes to his parents and he sees that he puts it on, and they notice that there's $10,000, 10,000 dirhams there in the pocket of the garment. So he